Okay, hi, this is Daniel, and once again we are testing out settings for the GoPro Max and trying to find out what is the most ideal setting and kind of the most universal setting and when to use each of those settings and for what event. So right now we are at EV negative 0.5 with a sharpness of medium, and we are in flat color profile. The ISO max is at 400 and ISO min is at 100. Okay, so now I've used the spot meter and I've spot metered on the lens facing me. So we can take a real quick look. We're gonna swipe it around and look at the waves and directly out at the sun and see how that looks. And now we'll go ahead and we will look back towards me. And so right now, with the spot metering, the ISO, the EV, the shutter, all of these things are overridden in favor of the spot meter. And then the color profile that I'm using right now is flat, and everything else is on auto. Okay, so now what I've done is I've raised the white balance to 45,000 Kelvin. And I have also spot metered to the upper right of the lens on facing out towards the sun over the ocean. We have a medium sharpness and a flat color profile. And so we're going to take a look at this for a little bit and go ahead and swing it around, look out over the ocean where it is spot metered towards the sun. And we can bring it back now towards me. And just looking at the LCD, I actually think that it looks better exposed this time than it did previously when I had it exposed back to me. It seemed like it didn't actually drop the or speed up the shutter, I should say, actually, and maybe even drop the ISO to be able to bring the brightness of my face down adequately when it was facing towards me. But now that I have it spot metered out towards the sun, it actually seems, to me at least, that it's exposing better even all the way around. So this is what we have right now. This is a medium sharpness with the flat color profile, spot metered, utilizing the brightest spot on the outward facing lens facing out over the ocean towards the sun. Okay, so this time we have the exact same settings except for the difference is the white balance is on auto. And so I just wanted to see what the difference is between when I choose the white balance versus when I'm allowing the camera to choose it automatically for me. So we'll go ahead and we'll take a look out over the ocean. And then we'll go ahead and swing it back over towards me. We still have that same spot meter right over by the ocean on the outward facing lens. Okay, so we have all of the settings the same as far as color and the flat color profile. But we now have sharpness on high, and we are still spot metered out over the sun with the outward facing lens. We'll go ahead and take a look out towards the ocean now. And then we'll go ahead and we'll bring it back to me. And so now the question is, which is better as far as sharpness? We have medium, which I was using previous, and then we have high. Now, as far as utilizing low, I don't think that's a bad idea. But it is something that you're only going to want to use when you are going to be doing your color grading and your editing on a desktop editor with something like Adobe Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve. Now I use DaVinci Resolve primarily now, but I kind of grew up with Adobe Premiere Pro, and I still have that. It's just that it's on my son's computer, and I got a new computer for myself, and I decided I would just go ahead and try to learn DaVinci Resolve, which I'm doing now. I'm still using the free version, which is why all of my videos are uploading in 1080 versus 4K. But eventually I'll probably go ahead and pay for the full version, just because you do get some other features in there. One of them being that it helps to clean up the noisy profile. Got a helicopter flying over me, the ocean sound out there, so I don't know exactly how well this is coming across. I did notice sometimes I'm actually too loud because the camera actually picks me up really good and better than I think that it's going to, even when I have all of this ambient noise around me. So anyway, so this is high. spot metered to the outside lens over the sun and a flat color profile, and then we'll go ahead and we'll switch this over to GoPro color and we'll check out the difference. But let's first, real quick, let's go ahead and drop it down to low. I will be editing this in DaVinci Resolve, so I'm going to do low sharpness, and then I will do low sharpness with some contrast and sharpness added to the video to see if that looks better than if I just went with sharp or medium to begin with. Okay, so all of our settings are the same. We are spot metered out over the sun, over the ocean. We have a flat color profile. Our ISO max is 400, our min is 100, but now we have a low sharpness, and so we're gonna go ahead and take a look out over the ocean real quick. And so we're gonna do that. And then we can go ahead and we'll swing it back to me. And then we'll see, does this look better? Is it a little too soft? And now what I'm gonna do right here is switch over to some color grading in DaVinci Resolve. And what I've done in this instance, I generally always bring up the contrast a little bit. I adjust my shadows, I adjust my highlights, the lift, the gain. And then once I've done that, I go ahead and I add an extra serial node, and then I do my sharpness. And that helps me to be able to get the most out of it. And I do find that when I use the low sharpness, I can really get a little bit more out of the contrast than I can if I'm in high. And now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add actually the Alexa LUT to this, and we'll see how that looks with the other adjustments also applied to it. So we'll do that right now. And now you're talking, now I'm talking to you with the Alexa LUT applied, and I'll actually do a video on how I go about converting the color palette to the Alexa and then adding the Alexa LUT to that. And really all it's supposed to do is really kind of smooth out the shadow transitions, as far as I understand, and mimic the Alexa cameras, which are, you know, ungodly cost. So anyway, we'll do a real quick look out to the ocean with these settings, and then we'll go ahead and we'll bring it back to me. GoPro, stop recording. Okay, so now we are in GoPro color. GoPro color, we are spot metered to the outside lens right over where the sun is at. So our shutter, our ISO, our EV, these things are all automatically being adjusted by the camera. Our sharpness currently right now is in low, and other than the GoPro color, everything else is the same. So we'll go ahead and we'll take a real quick look out over the ocean, and then we'll go ahead and we'll swing it back to me, and then we're going to take a look at medium and then also high. Okay, so once again, everything is the same. The white balance is in auto. We're in GoPro color, and we are spot metered out over the ocean. And right now, the lens is pointing towards me, but we're gonna go ahead and swing it around, look out over the ocean. And that is the lens now that is being spot metered over to that far right corner, close to where that rock is, way out there in the ocean, if you can see it. And then we'll go ahead and we'll swing the lens back to me. And now we are looking at medium sharpness, GoPro color, and auto white balance. Okay, and now we have high sharpness, and this is the GoPro color high sharpness, spot metered out over the ocean towards the sun. And then we're gonna go ahead and swing it around. We'll look out over the ocean now. And as we look out over the ocean, we see some surfers out there, and then we can bring it back to me. And so with the auto shutter and spot metered out there, now as the sun is kind of going in and out of those clouds, having that spot meter means that I am being underexposed, probably, I would assume. From what I can see in the LCD, it's not too bad, but it does seem a lot darker than it was initially when we started this. So I'll go ahead and I'll do a little adjustment right now to bring up the brightness. So we'll do that now in the editor. And then we'll see what we can do with that. So we can play with the lift, the gain, the highlights, the shadows, and we'll see how this looks, and is this something maybe we want to use. And then there's also the option I can actually reduce some sharpening in the editor. Now, in general, whatever you do in the camera, yeah, you can't really reduce and pull out a whole lot. So that's why in most cases, if you're going to do a lot of editing, the rule of thumb is to do as least amount of processing in the camera as possible, so that way you have more flexibility outside when you're doing your editing in your editor. So anyway, this is what we have right now. Okay, and so now I have spot meter to my face with the lens facing towards me, and I can see already it's much brighter. And this time, actually, with the sun behind that cloud cover, I think that it's exposing really well. It looks really good. But if we were to swing the lens around, or at least the view, to the outside lens and look out over the ocean, now the question is, how well is it exposing out there? So have I lost the ability to get a good exposure on the other lens just so that I could have a good exposure on this lens? Now, when it comes to something like blogging, or if I wanted to do a lot of this narration, then I know that I want this lens facing me to have the best exposure, and so that's where this touch exposure value is very, very important, and it's a really handy tool. Okay, so right now we have an ISO max of 400, but other than that, everything is in its defaults, and we have GoPro color, we have high sharpness, we have auto white balance. Actually, I think the EV is probably, if it did, and I didn't check this, but it probably dropped back to what I had prior to doing the exposure value, and I'll tell you as soon as I stop this recording, switch over. So it's probably, I think, at negative 0.5. So we'll go ahead and we're going to stop this recording, and then we're going to make sure that it's at 0, and that we'll actually put everything in the default to see how that looks. Okay, so this is default settings. Everything out of the GoPro Max, if you didn't make one change at all, and in most cases that's actually the right setting. It's the perfect setting, and it's the right setting to use. So we're just going to go ahead, we're going to run through the sharpness real quick, and I also want to run through the white balance real quick, just so we can take a look and I can just talk about the different values, what they mean, and how they affect the overall picture. So anyway, this is the default setting. We'll go ahead and take a look out over the ocean, and then we'll go ahead and we'll swing it back to me, and GoPro stop recording. Okay, so now I've manually selected the white balance. It's at 5,000 Kelvin. And so this is what looks to me to be the best white balance for this particular setting. So I'm gonna just run through them all real quick, and then you can get an idea as far as the cool to warm, and that's what's being applied to the image. So if you're in an area that is maybe too warm, or too in the reddish, orange, yellow colors, then you actually want to counter that by using a more blue Kelvin or color temperature. And then if you move into more of the darkness, and then you move into some more of the blues, then generally you want to go ahead and bring up that Kelvin temperature and let it get a little bit warmer. So we're just going to run through them real quick, little 10-second clips for each color. Okay, so here we are on the blue planet of Neptune with a Kelvin 23,000, a very blue look on this very cold planet. GoPro stop recording. And now we're getting a little bit closer to Earth and to our big orange sun. We are at a Kelvin of 28,000. GoPro stop recording. Okay, so now we're on I don't know, let's be on Saturn, and we have a 32,000 Kelvin color profile on the white balance, not color profile. Okay, and so now we are getting much closer to Earth in natural colors. This is 4,000 Kelvin, and manually selected on the GoPro Max. Okay, and so now we have a white balance of 4,500 Kelvin, and the GoPro Max. And now we have a white balance of 5,000 with the GoPro Max and GoPro Color and the high sharpness. And here we are with a 55,000 Kelvin with the GoPro Max, and it is currently about 4 p.m. February 28th at Shoal Beach with sun and a little bit of cloud cover. Okay, so we're getting a little bit more into the yellow-orange look, and so we are at 6,000 Kelvin with the white balance on the GoPro Max. And now we have safely landed on Mars with a white balance of 6,500 on the GoPro Max. Now what we'll do is we will take a look at native, and then we'll also make some adjustments to the native with DaVinci Resolve and post color grading. Hi puppy. Now that is a very white lab, so although I'm sure he's called a golden lab, but his color is very white, and so we can kind of use him to be able to take a look at the color accuracy. So let's go ahead and switch over to auto real quick. Go. So I don't think you're going to be able to see my little white dog. Oh, there he goes. Okay, so this is auto white balance with the GoPro Max. There he goes. Bye-bye. As he runs off. And so this would be the auto white balance. I personally, actually, whenever I can, I like to choose the white balance myself. I think that it keeps things a little more consistent, especially if I have cloud cover. I find that I don't get a lot of fluctuations in the white balance trying to continue to adjust. Also, it's more beneficial like when biking through a lot of greens, and then you like those fall colors. I find that that can really mess things up as well. So anyway, there you go. Okay, so this is native with GoPro color on the GoPro Max. Not a big fan personally because I really hate trying to color grade it. Let's see, I do have a white t-shirt, so let's go ahead and expose that a little bit. And so then I can use that. I'm going to choose that as my white balance with the editor. That's pretty sexy, huh? And how does it look now? So I've done that with the GoPro color, and then we're going to do it again now with a flat color profile and see how well that turns out. Okay, so now we have really desaturated it. So what we have right now is a flat color profile, which I like. It does tend to give a little bit more dynamic range, and it doesn't try to do too much as far as making the image so punchy. And then I can always add that color back in personally. But when using a native white balance, I find that this is very, very difficult to color balance or color grade personally. But that's just a skill level thing. Maybe you're much better at it. I'm going to go ahead and give my white t-shirt here for an exposures, and then now we will go ahead and do a little color grading. So it's really sexy there, showing off that t-shirt. So anyway, hopefully we got a good white balance selected on there, and then I'll do some adjusting myself, and then we'll, you know, adjust our gains, our lifts, even the offset sometimes, our highlights, our shadows, and then we'll be able to see how does this look. And then we're going to do one more final recording here before we wrap this one up, and that's with the ideal, awesome cinema, whatever it might be, and that's going to be going to 24 frames per second, flat color profile. I think most people would say like a -1 EV, native white balance, and we'll see how well that works out. Personally, I find that's just way overkill, and the 24 frames per second I don't like with the GoPro Max. I don't think there's a whole lot of benefit there because it does tend to cause more warping and jitter, especially when you're moving the camera around, and it's going to kill the stabilization. So I'm not a real big fan of the 24 frames per second. Just keep it at 30, you're going to do fine. Okay, so here are your professional best settings, and that would be ISO min and max at 100. A shutter is auto. Oh wait, no, I gotta go ahead and change that. I didn't change my frames per second. And then we gotta see, can we use the 180-degree rule and make our shutter 1/48? Let's find out. GoPro, stop recording. Okay, so here's your awesome professional 180-degree shutter rule, 1/48. I'm just kidding, this is overblown and we are definitely not using this. I'm bailing on it. GoPro, stop. Okay, so now we are in 24 frames per second with an auto shutter, an EV of -1. Our white balance is set to native, and our sharpness is on low, and our color is on flat. And so here are our settings, or how our image looks directly out of the camera. And we'll go ahead and we'll do a 360 back to me. We can do that now. And so as this is panning, you can see out over the ocean, bring it around the rocks, and then back to me. And then we'll go ahead and just do one thing, which is taking it off of this native white balance. So we'll do that on the next one. Okay, so now we have an ISO min and max of 100. We have an EV of -1. Our shutter is on auto. Our color is flat. And our white balance is set to 5,000 Kelvin. If I were to say what is the best setting, it would probably be this, but we are still currently in 24 frames per second. I generally also don't use such an aggressive EV. I go with -0.5. So we're gonna go to my personal favorite settings. And that's going to be with a medium sharpness, an ISO max of 400, ISO min of 100, EV -0.5, flat color profile, shutter on auto, and we'll move to that right now. GoPro stop. Okay, and so this is my basic go-to setting with an ISO max of 400. Although if you watched my video when I went into the caves with the low light, I was actually really surprised at how well the ISO being at 800 did. I didn't think it really had a whole lot of noise. And I know that the aperture is different on the max than it is with the normal GoPro Heroes. So I think that it's a 2.0 versus a 2.8. So maybe that's why it's a little bit better in low light and I'm able to use a higher ISO. But for right now, I'm using the ISO max at 400, especially during daylight. When it goes to evening, I'll generally go to 800 as my max. If I really want to make sure that I capture the scene, then I'll even jump it up to as high as 1600. And I think that's actually doable as well. The 3200 is way too aggressive. And then so the color profile is on flat, and my white balance is still at 5,000 Kelvin. GoPro stop.